It was a bright morning, the kind where the sunlight seemed to spill over the city in warm waves, making everything look softer, calmer, and full of quiet promise. She stepped out of her small apartment building, her hands full of books and a bag that had seen better days. The streets were already busy, people moving quickly. Faces lost in their own worlds, some with smiles, some with hurried frowns. She wasn't usually early for her errands, but today felt different. Almost as if something in the air had told her that this day would be remembered. He was already there, standing at the corner where the old cafe had its tiny outdoor tables, sipping coffee slowly. He didn't look like someone in a rush. His eyes were thoughtful, focused on something only he could see. And there was a calmness about him that made him stand out among the moving crowd. They didn't know each other yet, but something about the way they noticed each other immediately felt like the world had paused for a moment. She almost walked past without looking, but something made her glance up. Their eyes met, and for a second, it was like recognizing a melody you had never heard but somehow remembered. She felt her steps slow, the bag in her hand suddenly heavier. He smiled on, the quick, polite smile people often give strangers, but a gentle, sincere smile, like he was glad she was there. She smiled back awkwardly at first, then more naturally, and in that tiny exchange, something began to shift. Neither of them spoke yet. The city continued its usual rhythm. Car horns, chatter, footsteps on the pavement. But in their little corner of the world there was a pause, a quiet bubble that made everything else seem distant. She realized she had been holding her breath, and when she exhaled, it was almost as if she released the tension she didn't know she had been carrying. He looked down at his cup, and back at her and finally spoke. "It's nice out today," he said simply, and the simplicity of it made her laugh quietly. It wasn't a line meant to impress. It was just a statement, honest and real. She nodded, holding her bag a little tighter. "Yes, it is," she replied. And with those words, the first thread of conversation began to form. Tentative but strong, like the first notes of a song, the conversation moved slowly at first. They talked about the weather, the cafe, the little bookstore across the street that always seemed to have the same old bell jingling whenever someone entered. But even in these small details, there was something deeper being said. Something unspoken that connected them in a way neither fully understood yet. She noticed how he listened, not just heard, but really listened. And he noticed the way she laughed when she found something genuinely amusing, not forced, not pretending. Minutes passed, maybe longer, and they didn't even realize it. People walked past, cars passed by, and the city went on, unaware of the small moment unfolding in that corner. There was no rush, no need to fill the silence with unnecessary words. Even the quiet seemed alive, comfortable space that allowed them to be themselves without judgment or expectation. He asked her about the books she was carrying, and she told him, shyly at first, about her love for stories. How she liked losing herself in other worlds when her own felt too complicated. He smiled, understanding more than she expected. "Stories are important," he said. "They remind us of things we forget when life gets too busy." She nodded, surprised that he seemed to know exactly what she meant. She didn't realize she had been thinking the same thing until she heard it aloud from him. The way he spoke made her feel calm.
What?
Like a sudden warmth spreading through a chilly morning. She realized that talking to him didn't feel like small talk. It felt like discovering a new part of herself she hadn't met before. There was a curiosity, a genuine interest in understanding, not in impressing. And in that curiosity, she felt seen. Not judged, not analyzed, just seen. And that was rare. He asked about her day, and she told him about the errands she needed to run, about the little worries she carried, the things she tried to keep private but somehow spilled out naturally in his presence. He didn't tee off her cliches or quick fixes. He just listened, nodding, smiling, occasionally asking questions that made her think deeper, laugh harder, and feel lighter all at once. They walked together for a short distance, a natural extension of their conversation. As if the city streets themselves had decided they should move together. She noticed the way he moved, confident but not boastful, aware but not overbearing. He noticed the way she glanced at the windows, at the flowers, at people passing by, noticing details most overlooked. It was like discovering a rhythm they both belonged to, though they had just met. There were moments of silence. But these silences weren't uncomfortable. Instead, they felt like a promise that words weren't always necessary. Sometimes just being there, just existing in the same space, was enough to feel connected. And she realized that she hadn't felt this ease with anyone in a long time. At some point, he laughed at something small or comment she made about a sign on a shop window. She felt her heart skip in a way she didn't expect. It wasn't love yet, not like a storybook kind, but it was something. Something that made the world seem softer, more open, more inviting. She found herself looking at him more often than the streets, and he did the same, subtly, almost instinctively. They paused near a park, the kind with benches under large trees where sunlight danced through the leaves. He suggested sitting for a while, and she agreed, feeling that strange, unspoken pull to stay close. As they sat, the conversation deepened, shifting from small daily details to dreams, fears, and the odd little things that made life feel meaningful. She shared thoughts she rarely voiced, and he responded with empathy, not judgment. Each word, each gesture, seemed to build a bridge between them, one that neither had anticipated but both welcomed. By the time the morning began to give way to afternoon, something unspoken had formed between them. It wasn't love in a traditional sense, not yet, but it was a seed, a quiet understanding that maybe, just maybe, this meeting wasn't an accident. She felt it in her chest, a flutter that wasn't entirely nervousness or excitement, but a mixture of both. He felt it too, though he didn't try to define it, letting it simply exist, fragile but real. When they finally parted ways, it was with the kind of hesitation that speaks louder than words. She walked slowly, carrying the lightness and warmth of that conversation with her, feeling her steps less hurried, her thoughts softer. He watched her go, a small smile lingering, already anticipating the next time their paths would cross. Neither knew how often that would be or what the future held, but in that moment there was clarity. Something important had begun, quietly, beautifully, without fanfare or drama, and as the city moved on around them, oblivious to the small miracle happening in that morning, they both carried a tiny spark, one that would grow, change, and eventually shape their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. After that morning, life carried on, yet something had shifted in the rhythm of their days. She found herself thinking about him more than she expected. At first, it was just a passing thought, like remembering a song that had been playing softly in the background of her life, but soon it became a quiet anticipation, a gentle curiosity about what he might be doing, where he might be, and whether he was thinking of her too, for his part. He noticed that the memory of her smile lingered longer than usual. It was not just the smile itself, but the way her eyes lit up. She laughed freely, and how she seemed present in every moment, not distracted by the noise of the city or the chaos of life. He had met many people before, but there was something rare in the way she carried herself, a sense of authenticity that felt unfamiliar and refreshing. A few days later, by sheer coincidence, or perhaps fate, they ran into each other again at the same cafe. The same corner where their conversation had first blossomed now felt charged with quiet familiarity. She smiled as soon as she saw him, a little wave escaping almost before she realized it. He smiled back, this time a little broader, a little warmer, as if the world had arranged this meeting to continue the story they had begun. This time, they didn't linger only on small talk. Their conversation flowed more easily, more naturally, as if the first meeting had broken the surface, and now they were beginning to dive into deeper waters. They talked about their favorite books, movies, and music. She told him about her fascination with stories of people who had faced challenges, yet never lost hope, while he shared moments from his own life that had shaped him in quiet, unexpected ways. With each word exchanged, they felt the walls they usually carried around themselves slowly dissolve. She laughed at one of his stories, about a small mistake he had made at work. And he laughed too, not just at the story, but at the joy of seeing her laugh. There was an ease between them that neither had anticipated. It wasn't forced. It wasn't about impressing the other. It was about being present, truly present, in a way that felt both safe and exhilarating. Days turned into weeks, and their paths continued to cross, sometimes by chance, sometimes intentionally. They began sharing small rituals, meeting for coffee on certain mornings, walking through the park when the weather was nice, exchanging books or songs that had moved them. Each meeting, no matter how ordinary, carried a quiet excitement. A subtle understanding that something meaningful was growing. She found herself telling him things she hadn't told anyone else, little fears, small victories, fleeting thoughts she had tucked away. And he listened, not just with attention but with empathy, making her feel that her words mattered, that she mattered. He shared parts of himself too, bits and pieces of a life that wasn't perfect but was honest, full of experiences that had shaped him in ways he hadn't always understood. Together, they began to weave a tapestry of shared moments, small yet significant, that made each day feel fuller. One afternoon, they decided to take a longer walk, wandering down streets neither of them usually took. They found a small, quiet alley filled with sunlight and the faint scent of flowers from nearby windows. They paused, noticing the simple beauty of things often overlooked, the way a bird flitted between branches, the colors of peeling paint on old buildings, the laughter of children playing in a distant yard. In that shared observation there was a wordless connection, a sense that they were discovering the world together in a way that made even ordinary things feel extraordinary. She felt herself drawn to him in ways she didn't fully understand. It wasn't just attraction, it was admiration, respect, and a curiosity that kept growing. He, too, felt a pull that went beyond the superficial, a desire to know her deeply, to understand the small intricacies that made her who she was. Their conversations began to linger into the evenings, sometimes over messages, sometimes over phone calls, filled with stories, dreams, and thoughts that weren't meant for anyone else. One day, as they sat by the fountain in the park, she noticed how the sunlight caught his hair, how the shadows played across his face, and she realized that she was noticing him in ways that went beyond friendship. He caught her gaze and smiled, and in that smile, there was a silent acknowledgement of the growing bond between them. Neither spoke of it yet, but both felt it, like a quiet current moving beneath the surface. Gentle, but undeniable. There were moments of shared laughter that left them both breathless, moments of silence that felt like comfort rather than emptiness, and moments of understanding that didn't require words at all. She realized that being with him made her feel lighter, like she could carry the weight of her worries a little easier. He felt the same, noticing how her presence brought a calmness to his life that he hadn't known he was missing. Their bond wasn't without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, small insecurities that crept in. She wondered if he felt the same depth of connection she did. He questioned whether she would understand him fully, whether the layers of his life could be shared without being judged. But these doubts never lingered long, because the trust they were building was stronger than the fears. It was slow, careful, deliberate, like planting seeds in fertile soil and tending to them with patience. They began to learn each other's rhythms, how she twirled her hair when she was thinking, how he tapped his fingers lightly when excited, how certain words or gestures could make the other laugh without effort. These small discoveries brought them closer, creating an intimacy that didn't need grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It was subtle, quiet, and profoundly moving. One rainy afternoon, caught without umbrellas, they ran into a tiny shelter outside a shop, laughing as they shook off the rain. She felt a thrill in the shared inconvenience, in the way he offered her his jacket without making it seem like a chore. In the way they both laughed at the absurdity of the situation. They sat there for a while, listening to the rain, talking about everything and nothing. And it felt like the world had shrunk to that small corner where only the two of them existed. Through these days, weeks, and small adventures, their connection deepened. It was no longer just about the initial spark, but about a growing understanding, a sense that they complemented each other in ways neither had expected. She found herself looking forward to the next meeting, imagining the conversations, the walks, the small moments that made her days brighter. He did the same, feeling a quiet excitement that didn't shout but hummed softly in his chest. by the time the first month had passed. What had begun as a chance encounter had grown into something neither of them could define fully, yet both felt profoundly. It was a bond built on attention, understanding, and shared experiences, simple yet meaningful. They hadn't confessed love, nor had they planned a future. But the foundation was there strong, patient, and quietly transformative. And so, their story continued to unfold. Not in dramatic leaps, but in small, meaningful steps. Each meeting, each conversation, each shared glance added a layer to a connection that was becoming central to their lives. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't rushed, but it was real, and it was theirs. In the simple acts of noticing each other, listening, laughing, and sharing, they were building something beautiful, something that would continue to change the way they saw the world and each other. Life, as it often does, didn't pause for them. The city carried on with its usual rhythm. And while their connection had grown stronger, the outside world started to introduce challenges that neither could ignore. It began subtly, with small inconveniences and misunderstandings. Almost as if life wanted to test whether what they had built was truly strong. She noticed it first in herself. There were days when she felt uncertain, when the warmth she had felt so easily around him seemed to be clouded by doubt. Small worries crept in. What if he didn't feel as deeply as she did? What if the connection was only temporary, a fleeting spark that would fade as quickly as it had appeared? She tried to push these thoughts away, but they lingered, whispering in quiet moments when she was alone. He had his own moments of hesitation. He wondered if she truly understood the complexities of his life, the responsibilities and past experiences that weighed on him. He questioned whether he could meet her expectations, whether he could balance the demands of his world with the new and fragile world they were beginning to share. These questions didn't make him pull away, but they made him cautious, careful with his words and actions, sometimes overthinking small interactions that he usually wouldn't. Their first real challenge came unexpectedly. A miscommunication, small but impactful, triggered tension neither was ready for. She had mentioned something about her plans for the weekend, and he, misunderstanding her meaning, assumed she had made arrangements that didn't include him. He didn't voice it immediately, letting his disappointment simmer quietly. She, noticing a slight change in his demeanor, felt confused and hurt, wondering if she had somehow done something wrong for a day. They danced around the tension, both aware but unwilling to confront it directly. She found herself replaying conversations in her mind, analyzing every word, while he tried to decide how to approach her without causing more strain. By the evening, it was clear that the silence was creating more distance than the misunderstanding itself. Finally, he called her, his voice a mixture of regret and relief when she answered. They talked openly, honestly, and for the first time, discussed the fears and assumptions that had created the rift. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was a turning point. They realized that communication, even when uncomfortable, was vital, that their connection deserved effort and clarity. Even after resolving this first conflict, life continued to test them. Work obligations, family expectations, and personal challenges began to intrude on the simple rhythm they had enjoyed. There were days when she felt stretched too thin, balancing responsibilities while trying to maintain the growing closeness they shared. He, too, had moments when commitments pulled him away, leaving her feeling isolated, even if temporarily. These moments introduced new emotions: frustration, longing, and occasional sadness, feelings they hadn't had to navigate before. One afternoon, a particularly stressful day left her feeling overwhelmed. She had hoped to spend time with him, but unforeseen obligations kept her busy. He tried to reach her, leaving messages she didn't immediately see. When she finally noticed, she felt guilty, worried that he might feel neglected, even though she hadn't meant to cause any hurt. When they finally spoke, there were apologies, reassurances, and a quiet acknowledgement that life sometimes interfered. But it didn't have to diminish the bond they were building. Despite these challenges, there were moments that reminded them why their connection was worth preserving. A shared smile over something trivial, a comforting gesture during a tough day, or a spontaneous message that made the other laugh. They became anchors in the storm of daily life. These moments reinforced the importance of patience, understanding, and trust, teaching them that love, even in its earliest stages, was about effort and care as much as it was about joy and excitement. The first significant test came when a misunderstanding extended beyond a day or two. A casual remark made by a friend, interpreted incorrectly, sparked jealousy and insecurity. She worried that he might be drawn to someone else, while he questioned whether she fully trusted him. The tension was palpable, manifesting in small, court silences and conversations that skirted around the true feelings beneath the surface. It was the first time either of them faced a situation where emotions clashed with reason, and neither had a roadmap for handling it. Eventually, they decided to confront the issue together. Sitting across from each other at the cafe where they had first met, they spoke openly, each revealing fears, insecurities, and misconceptions. It was not an easy conversation. Emotions ran high, words occasionally stumbled. Yet, by the end of it, there was a sense of relief, a feeling of having faced a challenge together, rather than letting it create distance. They learned that vulnerability was not weakness, and that sharing fears could strengthen rather than weaken the bond they were building. Life's pressures didn't disappear, of course. Work deadlines, family responsibilities, personal anxieties continued to test them. But they began to navigate these challenges with a shared understanding. They developed subtle routines to stay connected despite busy schedules, a quick message in the morning, a phone call during lunch, a brief walk together in the evening. These small gestures became symbols of their commitment, reminders that even amidst challenges, they were present for each other. One evening, a minor crisis brought these lessons into sharper focus. She had an unexpected issue arise, one that required immediate attention and left her anxious. He dropped everything to be with her, offering not only practical help, but also emotional support. She noticed how effortlessly he calmed her fears, how he didn't rush or judge, simply being there. In that moment, the strength of their connection became undeniable, and both realized that the challenges they faced were not obstacles to love, but opportunities to deepen it. Through all these tests, they also discovered the importance of personal growth within a relationship. Each challenge pushed them to reflect on their own fears, habits, and expectations. She learned to trust more, to communicate clearly, and to let go of assumptions. He learned patience, empathy, and the value of expressing care consistently. These lessons weren't always easy, but they added depth to their bond, making it richer, more resilient, and more meaningful. By the end of this period, they had faced enough challenges to realize that love wasn't just about the joyful moments. It was about navigating the difficult ones together, learning to compromise without losing oneself, and supporting each other even when life felt heavy. Their connection had been tested, sometimes painfully, but it had endured and grown stronger because of it. And in that endurance, they began to see the real beauty of their bond. It wasn't the excitement of first attraction or the thrill of novelty that made it special. It was the way they could rely on each other, the way they could face life's difficulties together, and the quiet assurance that whatever came, they had found someone who understood them in ways no one else did. Time moved forward, and with it came the quiet, steady growth of their connection. The challenges they had faced together had begun to transform them individually and as a pair. They had learned patience, understanding, and the value of being present for one another. But even with these lessons, neither of them fully understood just how deep their bond had become until a moment arrived that changed everything. It happened on a weekend that began like any other. The sun was warm but gentle, the air carrying the scent of blooming flowers and freshly baked bread from nearby shops. She had planned to spend the morning running errands, but a sudden message from him suggested they meet for a walk in the park. She hesitated briefly, considering the chores waiting for her. But something in the tone of his words, a quiet eagerness without pressure, made her agree. That decision would mark a subtle shift in the rhythm of their relationship. When they met, the park was peaceful, almost empty, except for a few scattered families and joggers. They walked slowly along the winding paths, noticing details they might have overlooked before. A small squirrel darting across the grass, the way sunlight filtered through the branches, the soft rustle of leaves with each passing breeze. These ordinary moments, when shared together, began to feel extraordinary. They realized that happiness wasn't always about grand gestures. It could be found in simple, shared experiences. During their walk, he suggested sitting by the edge of the pond, where ducks floated lazily and the water reflected the sky in gentle ripples. As they sat together, a comfortable silence settled between them. Neither felt the need to fill it with words. It was a silence that spoke volumes, an acknowledgement of trust and presence that only grew stronger with time. In that quiet, they began to sense that something significant was about to unfold. She looked at him, really looked, noticing not just his appearance, but the energy he carried, the patience in his posture, the warmth in his expression, the subtle kindness in his gestures. She felt a flutter in her chest, an awareness that this connection had grown beyond friendship, beyond curiosity. It was now a part of her life that mattered in ways she couldn't yet fully describe. He, in turn, noticed the way her eyes lit up with each small discovery, how her laughter was genuine and unguarded, and how her presence brought a calmness he hadn't realized he had been missing. The turning point came in a conversation neither had planned but both had needed. She spoke about her dreams, long-held aspirations that she had rarely shared. He listened intently, asking thoughtful questions, encouraging her to elaborate, to envision possibilities without fear. In her vulnerability, she found courage. In his attentiveness, she felt valued and understood. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from dreams to fears, from hopes to memories that shaped them both. It was a dialogue that built bridges instead of walls. Revealing depths that had previously remained unspoken, he shared parts of his past that he had kept private, moments of struggle and uncertainty that had shaped who he was. He spoke of times when he had felt alone, when life's burdens had seemed too heavy, and how small acts of kindness and understanding had carried him through. She listened, offering empathy and validation. Realizing that these revelations didn't make him weaker, they made him more human, more real. In sharing, they found connection. It's a mutual understanding that strengthened the trust between them. As the afternoon light softened into a golden glow, they walked again, this time hand in hand, without consciously deciding to. The gesture felt natural, almost inevitable, and it carried with it an unspoken promise, a recognition that they were no longer separate in the ways that mattered most. Their conversations continued to deepen, moving from everyday topics to philosophical musings, from shared laughter to reflective silence. Each moment became a thread in the fabric of a bond that was quietly becoming unbreakable. A sudden rain shower surprised them. Light at first, then growing steadier. Rather than seeking immediate shelter, they chose to embrace it, running through the puddles, laughing as water splashed around their feet. In that moment, everything else, the challenges, the worries, the uncertainties of life, seemed distant. All that existed was the connection they shared, alive and uncontainable. They learned that love, in its purest form, could be playful and freeing, even amidst the unexpected storms of life. Later, as they sought refuge under a large tree, dripping and laughing, a more serious conversation began. They spoke about the future, not in terms of commitments or labels, but about hopes, intentions, and the kind of support they wanted to offer each other. She admitted her fear of losing the bond they had worked so hard to nurture, and he acknowledged the same fear. In expressing these mutual concerns, they found a profound reassurance that the foundation of their connection was not fragile, but resilient, built on understanding, patience, and shared values. That evening, as the rain cleared and the sky painted itself with streaks of pink and gold, they walked slowly back through the streets, their hands still intertwined. Neither felt the need to articulate every emotion, because the moments themselves conveyed what words could not fully capture. There was a sense of awakening, recognition that they had reached a stage in their relationship where the depth of feeling could no longer be ignored back at their usual meeting spot. He paused, looking at her with a quiet intensity that made her heart skip. She could see the thoughtfulness in his eyes, the awareness that this was a turning point. And in that gaze, she felt a mirrored realization. an understanding that what they shared had grown into something significant, something transformative. They didn't need to rush, didn't need to define it immediately. The acknowledgement alone was enough to mark the moment as pivotal. From that day forward, small gestures carried new meaning. A smile, a shared glance, a gentle touch, all became affirmations of a bond that had passed the test of time and circumstance. They began to plan small adventures together, exploring new parts of the city, trying new experiences, and sharing stories that brought them even closer. The ordinary became extraordinary because they experienced it together. The act of living side by side began to feel like a gift. They also learned the importance of patience in nurturing the relationship. Life would continue to present challenges, but this turning point had given them tools to navigate difficulties with grace and empathy. They recognized that love wasn't about perfection or constant excitement. It was about choosing to support, to understand, and to grow with each other every day by the end of the week. Their connection had reached a new clarity. They were no longer just two people who had met by chance. They were companions in life's journey, partners in laughter and reflection, and allies in facing the world's uncertainties. The turning point had not been marked by a dramatic confession or a singular moment of revelation, but by a series of small, intentional actions and realizations that crystallized into a profound understanding of each other. And as they parted that evening, walking away with a sense of quiet fulfillment, they both carried a new awareness that what they had was rare, precious, and capable of enduring the tests of time and circumstance. The bond they had nurtured was no longer fragile. It had become a source of strength, hope, and joy that would guide the next chapters of their journey together. The days that followed the turning point felt lighter, yet more meaningful. Everything they experienced together, from the quiet mornings to the unpredictable surprises of life, seemed richer, more vibrant. Their bond had grown into something steady, something that didn't require constant excitement to prove its strength. It was a quiet confidence, an unspoken understanding that whatever came, they were no longer alone. They spent mornings exploring the city at a relaxed pace, discovering little cafes, bookstores, and parks that neither had noticed before. Each place became part of their story, a small memory that they would return to in their conversations and reflections. She noticed how he laughed more freely now, how he shared thoughts and ideas that he had previously kept to himself. He noticed the same about Hertha, way she embraced small joys, how she spoke openly about her dreams, and how her presence made ordinary moments feel extraordinary. Even the challenges of life continued, as they always do, but they no longer felt like threats to their connection. There were moments of stress at work, small misunderstandings, and days when one or the other felt worn down by life's pressures. Yet they faced these moments together, not with fear or frustration, but with patience and care. They had learned that love was not just about enjoying the good moments. It was about supporting each other through the difficult ones, listening, understanding, and being present when it mattered most. One afternoon, they decided to spend the day at a quiet lakeside, just outside the city. The lake was calm, the water reflecting the sky like glass. They walked along the shore, collecting smooth stones and skipping a few across the water. They talked about small things, books they had read, music they liked, memories of childhood, but gradually, the conversation turned to life's bigger questions. Dreams, fears, hopes for the future. She shared aspirations she had kept private, and he spoke of lessons life had taught him, some painful, some joyful. It was a moment of deep connection, a reminder that they could share not just the surface of their lives, but the core of who they were. The day moved slowly, with sunlight softening into a warm evening glow. They sat side by side on the dock, feet dangling just above the water, and felt the quiet peace that comes when two people are completely comfortable with each other. There was no need for grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Their silence spoke louder than words, a recognition that they had found something rare, a bond that was grounded in trust, understanding, and genuine affection. As they walked back toward the city, the sky painted itself with hues of pink and orange. She felt a sense of calm she hadn't known before, as if the world had shifted slightly to accommodate the life she now shared with him. He noticed it too in the way her steps carried a lighter rhythm. how her laughter was easy, and how her presence made even the bustling streets of the city feel peaceful. In that shared experience, they realized that love had become more than just an emotion. It had become a guiding force, shaping their days, their decisions, and their outlook on life. The following weeks were filled with small, meaningful rituals. Morning coffee together, evening walks, spontaneous visits to new places. Each interaction reinforced their connection, not through grandiose acts, but through consistent care and attention. They learned each other's rhythms, understanding the unspoken cues that spoke volumes, a certain tone of voice, a glance, a pause in conversation. These small recognitions became threads that wove their lives together more tightly with each passing day. One evening, as they sat on the rooftop of a quiet building, looking at the city lights below, she felt a wave of gratitude. She thought about how far they had come from a chance meeting at a cafe to the depth of understanding, closeness they now shared. He noticed the thoughtful expression on her face and asked gently what she was thinking. She smiled, the warmth in her eyes reflecting both the past and the present. "I'm grateful," she said simply. "For this, for you, for everything." He reached out, taking her hand in his, and in that simple gesture, there was an unspoken acknowledgement of the journey they had traveled together. It wasn't just about the joy of being together. It was about growth, transformation, and shared resilience. She had discovered strengths within herself she hadn't known existed. Inspired by his patience, empathy, and unwavering support, he had learned to be more open, to embrace vulnerability, and to trust not just in their bond, but in the process of building it. Together, they had created a space where love could flourish. Unburdened by fear or doubt, a particularly meaningful moment came when they helped a stranger during a small incident in the park. A child had wandered too close to the edge of the fountain. Without hesitation, they acted together, guiding the child to safety and comforting the worried parent. Afterward, they sat on a nearby bench, laughing quietly at the unexpected adventure, realizing that their teamwork, empathy, and care extended naturally beyond themselves. It was a reminder that love wasn't confined to their relationship. It had a ripple effect, influencing how they interacted with the world around them, as weeks turned into months. Their bonds solidified in ways that felt both natural and extraordinary. They celebrated small victories together, a project completed at work, a personal goal achieved, a new recipe that turned out perfectly. They shared disappointments too, comforting each other during setbacks, offering encouragement, perspective, and unwavering support. These shared experiences, both joyful and challenging, became the foundation of a relationship that was steady, resilient, and profoundly fulfilling. Eventually, they reached a point where their connection could no longer be measured in casual interactions or shared moments alone. There was a deeper understanding, a recognition that they had become integral parts of each other's lives. She felt that he had become a source of strength, inspiration, and comfort. He felt the same, appreciating not just her presence but the way she had reshaped his view of love, life, and the possibilities of happiness. One evening, under a sky filled with stars, they walked along a quiet street, hands intertwined, feeling a sense of peace that came from knowing they had found something lasting. They paused to look at the night sky, the city lights twinkling below them, and shared their dreams for the future, not in terms of promises, but as possibilities they could explore together. The conversation was calm, reflective, and filled with a quiet excitement for what lay ahead. In the end, the beauty of their story wasn't in dramatic declarations or sudden twists. It was in the accumulation of moments, laughter shared over coffee, quiet conversations in the park, small gestures of care, and the steady presence of someone who understood and valued them completely. Their love had grown through patience, understanding, and shared experiences, transforming not just their relationship, but their lives individually. As they sat together one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, she felt a profound sense of contentment. He turned to her, smiled, and in that simple smile was a reflection of the journey they had traveled together, the moments of joy, the challenges they had overcome, and the bond that had grown stronger with each passing day. It was a love that had changed everything, not in a dramatic, obvious way, but quietly, subtly, and beautifully. And so, their story continued, not with an ending, but with a beginning, the beginning of a life shaped by love, trust, and shared understanding. They discovered that true love wasn't about perfection or constant excitement. It was about presence, care, and commitment. In each other, they had found a home, a safe place where both could be fully themselves, supported, understood, and cherished. In the glow of the setting sun, they walked side by side, carrying the knowledge that what they shared was rare, precious, and transformative. It had started with a simple meeting, grown through connection, faced challenges, and reached a turning point that revealed its depth. And now, as they looked toward the future together, they knew that their beautiful love story had changed everything quietly, profoundly, and irrevocably. Life continued in its gentle, unpredictable way, carrying them forward into new days filled with discovery, quiet joys, and shared moments. Their bond, already strong, began to deepen even further, evolving into something that felt inseparable. It's not just in presence, but in thought and feeling. They started noticing subtle ways in which each other's habits, moods, and perspectives became intertwined with their own lives. She found herself thinking about him at unexpected moments, not in an obsessive way, but as a gentle awareness, a presence in her mind that brought comfort and a sense of belonging. Even in mundane routines like preparing breakfast or walking down crowded streets, she found herself reflecting on his words, imagining how he might respond, or recalling little shared moments that had made her smile days or even weeks ago. He, too, carried her presence with him, in small gestures, pausing mid-task to send a message he knew would make her laugh, replaying a memory of her laughter when stress built up at work, or simply noticing the quiet rhythm of life and realizing he wanted her to be part of every step. One morning, they decided to go on a short trip to a quiet town on the outskirts of the city. It was not far, just enough to feel like an adventure, but close enough to remain grounded. They packed lightly, bringing only the essentials, but filled the day with anticipation. The journey itself became part of the experience, the conversations in the car, the shared playlist, and the excitement in their eyes when they spotted new streets, shops, or natural landscapes along the way. Each shared discovery, no matter how small, added layers to their connection, reinforcing the quiet understanding that they were exploring not just the world around them, but the world within each other. At one point, they found a small, old bookstore tucked into a corner, its windows fogged from the morning chill. The scent of aging paper and leather bindings welcomed them inside. They wandered through the narrow aisles, sharing books that resonated with them. She found a collection of short stories she had once loved as a child, and he shared a worn journal with notes scribbled in the margins. They read passages aloud to each other, laughing at lines that amused them, and pausing at moments that felt particularly meaningful. It wasn't just about the books. It was about sharing pieces of themselves, fragments of memory, imagination, and thought, in a space that encouraged intimacy and reflection. Later, they walked to a small cafe by the river, ordering simple meals and sitting near the window. The sunlight reflected on the water in golden patterns, creating a quiet magic that seemed to belong to them alone. Conversation flowed naturally, stories from the past, hopes for the future, little thoughts and reflections that might seem trivial, but in that space became significant. They noticed the way the world seemed softer, quieter, and more patient when experienced together, and it made them appreciate the richness of ordinary life. As the day faded into evening, they sat on a bench by the river, sharing a quiet moment of reflection. She spoke about how much she had grown over the past months, the courage to express herself, the patience to understand others, and the joy of finding someone who truly listened. He nodded, recognizing similar growth within himself, the ability to embrace vulnerability, the clarity that came from trust, and the sense of fulfillment in giving and receiving care consistently. These realizations didn't come with fanfare. They were subtle, quiet, and profound. Like noticing the first stars appearing in the night sky, life's challenges continued to arrive as it always does. There were unexpected delays, minor arguments, moments of stress, and days when one or the other felt overwhelmed. But these challenges no longer felt like threats to their connection. Instead, they became opportunities to practice patience, empathy, and understanding. She noticed that he didn't shy away from her difficult emotions, offering support without judgment. He realized that she wasn't afraid to express her thoughts and feelings honestly, even when it meant confronting uncomfortable truths. Together, they learned that love was not about avoiding difficulty, but about navigating it together with care and respect. A particularly meaningful moment came when they volunteered together at a local community event. It was simple work, helping set up tables, guiding participants, assisting where needed, but the shared effort became a reflection of the life they were building together. They laughed over small mishaps, encouraged each other when tasks became tiring, and found joy in giving themselves to something larger than just the two of them. That day became a symbol of their relationship, mutual support, shared purpose, and the quiet satisfaction of growing together in every aspect of life. They also discovered new ways to connect emotionally. Quiet evenings at home became cherished rituals, making simple meals together, listening to music, talking about dreams or fears, or simply sitting in silence while being near each other. She learned to notice his moods and offer comfort or encouragement without needing to be asked. He learned to observe her subtle expressions and respond with empathy and understanding. In these small, seemingly ordinary moments, they built a foundation that was stronger than any grand declaration of love could achieve. As the months passed, their relationship began to influence other parts of their lives. Friends and family noticed the calm confidence and joy that each brought into the other's presence. She began to approach her work with more patience and creativity. Inspired by the understanding and encouragement she felt from him, he found himself more open, reflective, and willing to embrace vulnerability. Influenced by the trust and care she consistently showed, their love didn't just exist in isolation. It became a force that gently reshaped how they approached life, decisions, and the world around them. One evening, after returning from a day filled with small adventures, they sat on the rooftop of their building watching the city lights twinkle like scattered stars. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her, feeling the familiar warmth and comfort of shared presence. They didn't need to speak. The quiet companionship was enough. Yet in that silence, both felt the depth of the journey they had shared, the growth they had experienced individually and together, and the beauty of a love that had become integral to who they were. Later that night, she reflected on the passage of time. From the first chance meeting to the moments of connection, the challenges, the breakthroughs, and the everyday shared experiences, she realized how much life had changed. There was a sense of gratitude that filled her heart, not just for him, but for the journey itself, for the lessons, the growth, and the realization that love could be gentle, patient, and transformative. He felt the same, understanding that what they shared was not fleeting excitement, but a lasting connection that had shaped him in ways he hadn't anticipated. In the weeks that followed, they continued to explore life together, small trips, shared meals, quiet evenings, and spontaneous adventures. They celebrated ordinary moments as if they were extraordinary, recognizing that the true beauty of life lay not in dramatic events, but in the accumulation of small, meaningful experiences. Each day became a testament to patience, empathy, and the quiet joy of companionship. Through it all, they discovered the essence of enduring love. It wasn't about perfection or constant excitement. It was about presence, understanding, and shared growth. It was about choosing to be there for each other consistently, to listen, to support, and to value each other's individuality, while nurturing the bond they shared. They realized that love could transform not just a relationship, but the individuals themselves, guiding them toward greater understanding, compassion, and joy. And so, as part 6 of their journey unfolded, it became clear that their story was not defined by a single event, a dramatic confession, or a life-altering moment. It was defined by the steady accumulation of care, trust, shared experiences, and quiet reflections that strengthened their connection every day. In this ongoing process, they discovered a love that was resilient, deeply human, and profoundly transformative.